Well, Mack, I understand that you have ancestors that have been in this part of the country since 1832 and the land lottery that opened up this area to settlement.
That's right. My third great-grandparents, John and Hattie Turner, came here from South Carolina, and they received one of the land lottery lots up near Pumpkin Vine Creek. And they lived there until his death in 1861, about the time the war started. Mm-hmm. So he had several children. Some of them migrated to Arkansas. We really don't know why, but some of them stayed in the area. And one of his sons was the tax collector at Altoona for, I guess, the southern district of what then was Cass County. It would now be Bartow. And then my second great-grandfather, he joined the Civil War here in Ackworth, signed up for it. And Ackworth, at that time, we saw his papers had a K in the spelling, A-C-K.
Oh, really?
I don't know if you've seen that before.
No, I haven't.
Yeah, I can probably get you that paper, but I thought that was pretty unique.
This is a printed document with A-C-K?
Yeah, and I've seen a couple of more documents with that. I think just a short time, I don't know why, but it was spelled with A-C-K. Mm-hmm. So anyway, he went on and fought. He was in the 41st Regiment, and he was injured in the Battle of Vicksburg. So when the war ended, he was in the hospital in Macon, Georgia. So he got out and came back and settled some of his dad's affairs and took care of his estate. Then he moved into Paulding County. And that's where my kind of immediate heritage was, in Paulding County for several generations. And both my mom and dad were from Paulding County. So anyway, that's kind of a little bit of rundown on it.
Yeah. Well, that area is a really rich, biodiverse area, Pumpkin Vine Creek. And
Right.
I know our people in the biology department are doing lots of projects on Raccoon Creek.
Right. There you go.
So that's, well, they're not exactly your stomping grounds, I guess, but at least for...
Well, a little bit of, I'll go back on that a little bit. He got a lot on Pumpkin Vine Creek, or right there at it. Mm-hmm. But when he died, he was not living on that lot. He had moved up, according to my cousin, who does a lot of history on our family, he had moved up to what today is like Blackacre Trail and 41. Mm-hmm. There's a big salvage yard there. Mm-hmm. I think it was owned by the Griffins at one time. Mm-hmm. But when he died, he was living there, so we don't know where he traded lots or sold one and bought one. So he actually had two different lots there. Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. So,
okay. And so you were born in Cartersville Hospital?
Right, the old Cartersville Hospital, right.
Mm-hmm. And then your parents moved into Ackworth after that?
The year I was born, they were already living here when I was born. In 46. So actually what happened, we were in Ackworth, 190 years ago. Then they took about an 80-year hiatus and came back in the 40s. So
why did they move back?
Well, my dad was in the logging and timber business, and at that time there was what was called, actually not, I never remember it, but there was a big lumber company close to where we lived there. And I guess he moved back to kind of be in that kind of work. Mm-hmm. So,
well, what was it like growing up in Ackworth?
Well, it was fantastic. I grew up down on Southside Drive, about a half a mile south of town, and right across the railroad from the Coates and Clark Mill Village. Mm-hmm. And we just had some really good neighbors in that area. It was a kind of area where everybody would come and sit on everybody's porch, and if some of the women folk got sick, my mom and the rest of the ladies would go over and do the housework and carry food over. So it was just a real close-knit neighborhood. So it was. I think from watching some of the interviews, it was about like everywhere else. Mm-hmm. So it was just a real good, I wouldn't trade anything for growing up there.
Yeah. By that time, did most of the mill houses, were they private, people owned them by that time?
No, I don't think so. I think the mill still owned them, and they rented them to them really cheap. Mm-hmm. I don't know what the rent was, but I'm pretty sure about that. I'm not totally sure, but I know I think when the mill changed hands or what, they offered the people who lived there a chance to buy those houses, and so.
And the mill built the ball fields.
Well, from what I've read, I think that ball field was built by Mr. Keenel and some of the business people here. They got like a bond up or something locally and built it. And that field was built in I think in the 40s. And but I only lived a few hundred feet from that mill, just right across the railroad, right through the village there. So I stayed over there a lot. That field was. It was the center of everything athletic in Ackworth. That was really the only field.
Did you play on some ball teams?
I played Little League and Pony League and midget football. See, at that time you had Ackworth High. They played their baseball and football on that field. You had midget and Pony League, and then you had Little League, and the Ackworth had a city league team. And it was some older men that played on it, but they played local towns around Canton, Cartersville, and it was pretty competitive. And actually, that was one of my jobs. I chased foul balls.
Okay.
I'd have to stand over at the grandstand on alert, and if a ball got fouled over, because they only brought so many balls to play with back then.
Sure.
So I think I made a couple of bucks a night, but I would have been over there anyway, So.
Was the Eli Whitney School still in operation at that time?
No, not. I think that school. I'm not really sure about the dates, but I think that school closed operation in the late 40s.
I think so. What was it being used for?
A community house. Community house. Okay. They used it for just the city had some kind of event. They'd have it there. But it was just great growing up there. The Mill Village folks, I can't say enough about them, just really fine people. And they treated us kids who didn't live there like family, So, and also, the Mill Village had a little flat, they had a flats here at the Ackworth School. They had a flats in the Mill Village. And we used to play on that all the time, too. That was one of our gathering places. And we played football there, and we played tackle. I mean, it wouldn't touch. So I think some of the injuries I've got today are probably stem from 10 or 11 years old getting chalk blocked or something,
Right,
So
right.
Anyway.
Well, I guess you went to the Ackworth School.
Started at Ackworth School in 1952 and graduated from North Cobb in 64.
Okay. Tell me about the principal, Steve Cantrell.
Steve Cantrell probably is the only reason I graduated from North Cobb. I wasn't a good student. I really didn't like school and at that time. And I think he took me on as a personal challenge. And if it hadn't been for him, he just kept calling me in his office and talking with me. And I think if it hadn't been for him, I would have never graduated. So I owe him a lot.
Yeah. You just wanted to do other things?
Yeah, I'd kind of got into, I wasn't in any trouble a lot much. I just, I started playing pool and I liked that. And so I just thought I needed to be doing other things or may get a job or something. But thankfully, he didn't think that.
Right.
So.
Well, sitting quietly in a seat all day is not for everybody.
So that's kind of how that went.
Did you play football in high school?
No, I didn't. I played athletics in grammar school, but like I say, when I got to North Cobb, I kind of became a rebel, and I just wasn't interested in athletics. Other things interested me, so I never played. I think I did play my freshman year. I think I did go out for the B team. I might have played a few games on the B team footballs. I don't even know if they still have a B team. But have you ever heard of that?
Well, yeah.
Yeah. So
yeah.
I guess they may still have it. I don't know.
Yeah. If you have enough players to more than you need
right.
for your varsity. Well, it's 64 is too early for all the protests of the late 60s, so you were kind of a rebel without a cause.
Right.
Like James Dean.
Right. I guess so. But some very interesting times at North Cobb. Like I say, once I kind of got on track and got back with my class there, it was that was a good time to be alive in the '60s, as you know. I don't know how old you are, but
I'm 3 years older than you are.
Well, okay, there you go. So you can relate. It was a little bit of everything going on in the '60s. So,
What did you do after you graduated from high school?
well, I had a few oddball jobs, and then I met my wife in 1965, and I went to work for the city of Ackworth for a while reading water meters. And then we got married in '66. And then shortly thereafter in '66, later that year, I went to work for Lockheed.
Okay.
And like I say, I worked there for quite a few years, got laid off. And then in the late '70s, I kind of got into the real estate business. And that's what I ended up retiring from.
You didn't ever get drafted?
Never got drafted. I went down to the draft, but they didn't call me, so in a way I was okay with that. In a way I wouldn't. I was ready to go. So that's all I know about that.
Yeah, sure. Well, I guess lucky you in one sense in those years.
Maybe, I don't know.
So,
I feel kind of guilty about it. I mean, like I say, I was ready to go, but
it wasn't your fault.
it wasn't my fault. They didn't call me, so I guess
they had more than they needed.
I guess. I don't.
Okay, so worked for Lockheed for a while and then went on to other things?
Yeah, I'd done a few other things, and then I'd say in about 1976 or 7, I started getting into the real estate business a little bit, and I ended up had quite a bit of rental property, and I owned a few pieces of land. I bought and sold some land, so that's kind of what I stayed in the real estate for the next 30 years until I retired in 2006. So my wife and I have been retired almost 13 years.
Okay. I know my father-in-law would, as soon as he had enough money to put down the down payment, he'd buy a house and do all the work himself, keeping it up, and pay the mortgage with the rent that came in.
Right.
Is that what you did?
Well, I built a mobile home park in 1984, a 100-unit park, and that was my biggest income producer. And I had several rental houses and stuff, but mostly it was that mobile home park. And
did you do your own maintenance?
Well, I've done a lot of it. So, and then I had quite a few rental units, so I had to learn how to do remodeling and everything, So at that time, a guy told me one time when I got in that business, I was waiting on somebody. I couldn't get anybody to do any work. He said, I'm going to tell you something. He said, if you're going to stay in this business, you need to learn how to do this work yourself. So I took him at his word.
Well, you save a lot of money if you can do it yourself.
So we did. We done a lot of it ourselves.
Yeah. Wow. So that was your career then, I guess, keeping all those properties.
Right. That was it.
How many houses did you end up with? I guess you still have some.
Well, at one time I had about 28.
Did you? Wow.
So we had, we were, a lot of people, the rental business is a tough business, but I learned a long time ago that all businesses are tough. If you're successful at them, you're going to work, and some of them got more headaches than others, but you just kind of, you learn to accept that.
I guess you learned a lot about human nature.
Oh yeah.
People that you rented to.
Right. Had some good renters. We handpicked them a little bit because I finally got to the point to where I'd rather have my houses sitting empty than have somebody in there tearing them up. So we got a little more selective, and that worked out pretty good. We had some people that lived with us for years, so it was worked out pretty good.
Yeah, great. Well, you've been involved in lots of community activities over the years. Why don't you talk about
Well, I hadn't ever been involved in that many. Been involved in a few fundraisers. My wife and I, you want to talk about our cars? I mean, we got involved in some of the stuff through the cars.
Okay, talk about that. What's a muscle car?
Well, in 2006, when we retired, now back in the 60s, when all these muscle cars came out, you'll remember that. They had like the muscle car wars. Everybody was trying to outdo everybody. And I always wanted one of those cars but couldn't afford it. Mm-hmm. So when we retired in 2006, I bought like a Cutlass convertible to start with. Mm-hmm. We started going to some shows, and I found out that these shows done a lot of good fundraisers and things. So we and of course, before you know it, I had a whole garage full of cars and had to build another garage. That's how it starts. You start off buying a couple of cars, and then you got to have a place to put them. So it's a pretty expensive hobby. But we done a lot of, I put on shows, and we done some fundraisers through the car shows, met some real good people, and we still enjoy the friendships with them today.
Are you talking about fundraising for charities?
Yeah, a lot of the car shows, I'd say about half of them are put on for charities.
Okay.
So, and they do a lot of good. They raise a lot of money.
So people pay to come look at the cars by contributing to the charity? Yeah,
or like if somebody's putting on the car show, you have to pay to enter your car in the show to get it judged. So like if you pay $20 to enter your car, then they give some trophies away, but they'll make a few $100 for the charity. Mm-hmm. So.
Yeah. So you've been doing that for about 20 years now? 15
well,
years?
In 2006, probably 13 years, yeah. So, but I wouldn't recommend that hobby to everybody. It's like I say, it's an expensive hobby, but we've really enjoyed it. I mean, luckily we've had enough money to kind of stay in it, but it's an expensive hobby.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. By the way, I forgot to ask you about Henry Guess's taxi service.
Yeah.
Talk about that. You would have been 13 years old at that time?
13 or 14. I guess I was either lucky enough or unlucky enough to find out Henry Guess needed somebody to answer the phone for him. So I went up and talked with him about it, and I guess I was about, like you say, 13, 14 years old. That would have been in 1959, 60. Mm-hmm. And so he hired me to answer the phone on Saturdays, and I think he paid either $2 or $3 a day. I'm not real sure about the amount, but it wasn't very much. Yeah. And kind of a little funny story about that. Henry Guess was on the north end of the depot. The north end of the depot had like a parking lot right beside the depot, and the south end only had maybe just a driveway to get in there. So Mr. Guess was on the north end, and Dan Cantrell was on the south end, and they didn't like each other. I mean, they really didn't like each other. It was pretty obvious. So at that time, one of my cousins was answering the phone for Dan Cantrell, and we didn't like each other very much either. So it was pretty chilly there on Saturdays. Wasn't a whole lot of people looking at each other or having much to do with each other. So, but I would have probably answered the phone for him for nothing, just to get to hang out in town and at the depot. That's where I kind of fell in love with the depot, was answering the phone for him. So,
what was the depot like?
Well, what I remember about it, it was pretty dark inside. It had just old kind of brown wood, and it had the scales sitting out in the middle of the floor. And when I was working there, Ed Huffstutler, I think he had just taken over, because I think Mr. Pittner ran it before him. Mm-hmm. And he took a liking to me. He'd let me come in and hang out, and he never tried to run me out of there. So, but I just enjoyed the hustle and bustle of it. The people getting off the trains, the freight, and everything. So I guess I was hooked on it then. That was my favorite building in Ackworth after being around there for a while.
Yeah. So it served both passenger and freight?
Right, yeah. Mm-hmm. Yeah. And at that time, the hotel was still in Ackworth. The big hotel, it was up here where the Lacey's and all that is.
Right.
And Mr. Guest would send me over there to get us a sandwich or a hamburger or something, and they had pretty good food there, So So that was one of the perks. He did buy my lunch. So
How many trains came through a day?
I couldn't say, I didn't really keep up with that. Probably 10 or 12 while I was there. I don't know.
So,
I guess back then that would have still been the L&N Railroad. I think it was L&N was in charge of the railroad then.
could be.
Yeah.
And so there were enough passengers to take advantage of that hotel then, I guess.
Yeah. The way I understand it, we're going back into the talking with Nancy Maxwell and a few people. This would be back, I guess, in the 30s, 40s. People would ride that train, get off there, go to the hotel, and go down to the mineral well. They had a big not a big mineral well, but they had a mineral well at Park Street. And I guess it was, people thought they were getting medication out of it or something. But it was a pretty big deal. She said people came from everywhere to drink that mineral water. So I don't know if you'd ever heard of that well, but it's still there. They built a playground out there, and it's got a little grate or something over it, but the well's still there.
Wow. Where did you play pool?
Well, I started off about the time I was answering the phone for Mr. Guest. A little bit after that, I wasn't quite old enough, but there was a pool room right across the street, Rabbit's Pool Room, and it only had 3 tables.
Rabbits?
Rabbit's Pool Room, and that's what the guy that ran it, that's what they called him. And so, started kind of slipping in there and playing a little bit, and I just fell in love with the game, and I still enjoy it today. It's a really competitive game. It's when I play at I won't say a high level, but a pretty high level. And once you get to that level, it's about like golf or something. The better you get, the more you want to practice and get better at it.
So you were playing for money?
A few times, yeah. I have played for money. And I know when I first started going in there, my folks would give me my lunch money, and a few times I'd have to be over to school experiencing a few hunger pains, because I couldn't go back and tell them I'd lost it at the pool room,
I guess not.
So, but anyway, there was quite a good group of guys came in there, and some of us kids, I say kids, we were 14, 15, or 16. I guess we were still kids. Some of us started to hang out there, so it was kind of a gathering place.
What kind of reputation did the pool hall have in town?
It wasn't bad. I mean, they would leave the doors open. I think they had a couple of double doors there, so they'd just leave them swung open and people would walk by. So there wasn't a whole lot of bad language. It wasn't bad, And
What else did you do for entertainment? We talked about the ball field and all that.
That was not a whole lot else, I started playing golf on into the 60s when I guess I started playing golf, and I'd have been in my 20s. So I played golf a little later. I played golf for a lot of years. And I'd probably still be playing, but I got a bad hip. And so I'm afraid to play anymore.
Where did you play?
Well, I was a member of a couple of clubs. I was a member over at Canterbury on Canton Road. Of course, that course has been removed, and they've built houses in there.
Oh, they have? There's no longer a golf course?
No, it's gone. And I don't know if you remember, but they said Billy Lothridge and I think Randy Johnson, that used to play for the Falcons, they either owned that course or might have had something to do with building it. But it was a neat little golf course. I played there, and then we just played all around. We kind of freelanced.
I would go running around those neighborhoods on occasion.
Oh, you live over that way?
Well, I didn't live that close, but it was one of the places you could get off the roads and go for a run.
Yeah, that was a fun little golf course.
Talking a number of years ago now.
Right.
Wow. What about
By the way, I used to play pool with Larry Nelson. You did his interview. We used to play together. Yeah, he was a good pool player, and I guess he still is. When he came up to do his interview, I told him we need to get together to play some, and he said we would. We haven't yet, but I'm still waiting. So maybe we will.
Did you play golf with him?
I only got to play golf with him one time. He came over to Canterbury one day, and we were getting ready to tee off, so he played 9 holes with us. And Of course, it's pretty intimidating playing with him, but we struggled through it. It was.
He had mercy on you?
No, he didn't have any mercy. I mean, he just played his game, I don't know what he shot. He's probably 2 or 3 under par, I guess, But that was back when he was in his heyday,
Yeah. Did you go to the lake very much?
Yeah, I went to the lake a lot. Of course, everybody talks about the beach in these interviews. When I started at Ackworth Grammar School, you'd know more about this than me, but I think the beach had just opened.
Yeah, in the early 50s.
We would line up 3 or 4 classes, single file, and march down to that beach, and get and have a picnic or play on the beach and play at the playground. And we thought we had really arrived. I mean, to walk out of school and be standing on a beach in a few minutes, it was really special. And of course, that beach has remained great for this town over the years.
So they made you march single file.
Oh, yeah, about like military style. You better not get out of line either.
Well, they wanted to make sure you didn't run off somewhere, I guess. Well, tell me, how did you get involved with the effort to save, I guess, Depot number 3 in Ackworth?
Well, how long have you got?
No,
we, to tell you the truth, that started with I joined Facebook in about 2011 or 12. I'd have to go back and look. And I found this group site, Ackworth, Kennesaw. And we got to talk about a lot of different subjects, and one of the subjects was that we didn't think that the leaders of Ackworth in the 60s and 70s should have tore down all those buildings on the east side of the street, especially the depot. So it was a pretty lively conversation. So one day somebody challenged me. They said, well, why don't you quit talking about it and do something about it? And I thought, well, maybe I will, So that's kind of how it started, and I didn't know it was going to be a 6 or 7 year effort. I just thought I'd look into it. So we had a few meetings of the people that showed some interest in it, and we finally decided to form a board. And at that time, I didn't even want to be on the board. I just wanted to kind of help with it, but they insisted, so I agreed to take vice president, which I still am. And but anyway, we formed a board, and anyway, I'll back up a little bit.
Okay.
I told them that I would get a meeting with the city, and we'd go in and talk with them about could anything be done about that. This is in.
What was the danger? Anything done about what? You're going to go to the city and.
Well, I say I'm going to back up to just start over and say I told some of the folks that I said, well, why don't we just get a meeting with the city and see if there's anything to be done about those buildings? This is before we ever had a private meeting.
Okay.
So anyway, they a lot of them agreed. Let's do that.
Okay.
Well, we got up here to the city that morning, and you guessed it, I'm the only one here. So
where were the rest of them?
They didn't show up. So now we go on and meet. I say we. I started to leave. I said, well, nobody's going to show up. So somebody came out there and asked me what I was here for. So I said, well, they're supposed to have a meeting with the city. And he said, well, they're ready. So I said, well, I'm going to go and meet with them since I'm here. Yeah. And so they didn't give a whole lot of encouragement about those buildings. They said if those buildings were ever brought back, they'd have to be brought back through private funds because they didn't have any plans for them. And so...
And who owned the buildings at that time?
A fellow named Tom Tucker from Marietta owned the buildings.
Okay.
So anyway, I left here pretty discouraged. Not only did I not find out anything good about their plans for the depot, but I was a little bit TO'd because nobody showed up.
Sure.
So I had a kind of a double disappointment going there.
Sure.
So, but they kept bringing it up on Facebook, and I said, okay, I'm going to give you guys one more chance. I said, I'm going to be at so-and-so. I think it was across the street here at the Center Street Grill. I said, I'm going to be there Friday at 12 o'clock. I said, if y'all really want to do anything about this, show up. So I don't remember how many showed up, probably 7 or 8. So we had a pretty good talk, and we decided to meet again. I think we rode down to the buildings, and we had 2 or 3 meetings like that. Then we decided to form a board. So that's kind of how the board came about. And we had this young man named Michael Hellenick, who was really smart about doing all the organizational papers. I think he owned his own business. So he's the one that kind of set up our early paperwork and bylaws and all that. And of course, our plans were to try to bring those buildings back on private property somewhere here in town somewhere. We just wanted to try to save them.
So bring them back, like move them?
Yeah, we were going to have to buy them, deconstruct them, and move them.
And what did Tom Tucker want to do with the property?
Well, he just wanted to sell the buildings.
Okay, so he'd be happy to sell them to anybody that could tear them down or do whatever they wanted.
And later on in the deal, we ended up signing a contract with him, gave him some earnest money after we got our 501, which was part of him filling out the paperwork. And, of course, then came the tough part, trying to raise money. I mean, if you had never tried to raise a pretty good bit of amount of money on something like that.
Yeah. How much money are we talking about?
Well, I'm getting a little bit ahead of myself here because we end up, the city, after we got our 501c, I guess they seen we were serious. So they said they would give us that lot up there where they're putting the depot now. If we would have to raise so much money by a certain date. And we did, I think it was like 15 months we had to raise, and we had to raise the money in like 2 or 3 different sections. The first installment was like $150,000 that we had to raise, which that would have included buying the buildings, doing the engineering drawings, and of course getting the buildings ready to come on that lot, storing the lumber until they got ready to build it.
So you could buy the buildings for that amount of money?
Well, we could buy the buildings. I think we had a contract on those 2 buildings for about $30,000.
Oh, okay.
But that was just a small part of it. The other part, the engineering, and was you kind of got into a lot of money with that.
And the buildings were the depot. What were the buildings?
Well, they were, the depot was cut in half and moved down to Wynn Street, and half of it's still sitting there today.
Okay.
So that we were going to buy both buildings if we could have made it happen. There was still a lot of beautiful lumber in those buildings. They look bad. Those buildings been sitting there deteriorating for 50 years, but they were built out of like heart pine lumber and everything. So a lot of the lumber, there was more than enough lumber in there to build the size of building they're building here now. So,
but you say the 2 buildings, though. This is the depot cut in half.
Cut in half.
2 buildings.
That's how they moved it in 1970. They cut it in half, moved it down to Wynn Street. Then they blocked the ends where they cut it, and they rented it for storage buildings. And I think one of the buildings did have somebody, I guess, that sold used tires, had a bunch of tires in it. But they rented it. I think the cable company had stuff stored in it at one time. They were just basically storage buildings.
And that's what it's still being used for, that half?
Well, I don't know. I hadn't been down there lately, but it was. I haven't been down there and checked on it lately.
Okay, so you start raising money. How much did you raise?
Well, I couldn't really tell you how much we raised, but we probably raised, in the period of that time, we had already had people donating to us before we even got our 501c. I'd say, well, you realize you can't write this off. We don't care. I mean, so we had raised some money, and I'd say we probably raised $30,000.
Okay.
But I started a pledge, and I said, we had a meeting, and I said, today I'm pledging $5,000. If we can get 20 people to agree to pledge $5,000, we'll almost get to our goal. And before we left the meeting that day, either 1 or 2 more pledged. So, and in the end, we had 14 people to pledge $5,000. To me, I think that was the biggest thing when we brought that list in and showed the city, and there was some pretty prominent names in the city on it. Mm-hmm. So I think by maybe seeing that, I keep, they'd have to speak to that, but I think that had a lot to do with maybe convincing them something needed to happen. Mm-hmm. So, but anyway, we didn't reach our goal, and time lapsed. I think it was in June of 2015, and we were all distraught because we didn't make it. Mm-hmm. And but I seen a few signs there that the city might have something brewing. I didn't know for sure, but a couple of little telltale things there. So at the Christmas party in 2015, we got invited because we donated a couple of monuments that were up there beside the pavilion. Mm-hmm. One of them was telling about the railroad and the depot. Mm-hmm. So we came up there for the unveiling of those monuments, mm-hmm. and at that unveiling, they broke out with an easel and a set of plans for everything they're doing now. Oh. So we left there on cloud nine. We were, mm-hmm. we had went from failing to, it looked like something was going to happen.
Right.
So it's kind of how that came about. Then right after that, the city asked us officers. The group had already kind of dissolved. They asked us if we'd be interested in getting involved with the collection of history and everything. And we were able to change our 501c from the Save Ackworth Depot Foundation mm-hmm. to the Save Ackworth History Foundation, because mm-hmm. part of the mission statement was to educate the public on history. That's mm-hmm. what we were trying to bring the buildings back for, as a history center. Mm-hmm. So we were able to get our 501c switched over, and that's kind of how the Save Ackworth History Foundation was born.
Okay.
So that's a pretty long, drawn-out explanation, but I don't know any other way to.
Sure. So the goal now is to save Ackworth history and talk about some of the things that you've done.
Well, like what we're doing right here. Okay. I think our group is funded. Now, when I say our group, the people who've donated to our group, mm-hmm. and we've had a lot of great people to donate, are funding stuff we're doing today. Becca, we're gathering all kind of. We probably got 2,000 pictures, mm-hmm. and old pictures, great pictures I didn't know existed. A lot of neat artifacts. Mm-hmm. We have our speaker series, which I know you're going to be speaking soon, and that's become pretty popular. It's created a Facebook page. I don't know if you're on Facebook, but we got about 3,000 members, and we keep finding out neat stuff on it. So it's became a pretty popular place. Mm-hmm. But what makes me happier about it than anything is just the people of this town have got involved in it. I've seen, and I've made friends of people I would have never known, and I think a lot of other people could say that too. So just the community involvement has been great.
Mm-hmm. Great. I was actually in a program in Marietta at the Marietta Museum of History of nurses from Kennestone, and a couple of them mentioned that they've been involved with Save Ackworth History Foundation.
Yeah.
And we're very proud of that.
They have? What was their name? I shouldn't have asked, right?
I'll tell you what, but I can tell you. Let's see, which ones were those that were? There may have been Claire Brackett.
Yeah,
and Sue Corbin.
Right.
Okay.
They were both involved in the Save Ackworth Depot effort, uh-huh. and both of them great ladies, and they were real hard. When we were doing that effort, Dr. Scott, I mean, everybody in that group was so devoted that, I don't know, we probably had 15 or 20 members in that group, but we'd get out and do car shows or yard sales or bake sales, whatever. We'd literally be out sometime 100-degree heat. Mm-hmm. And so people were just devoted to that. I never heard nobody complain. They wanted to see something happen. So mm-hmm. so those two ladies were certainly involved.
Okay, great. Well, tell me about the History Center. What do you envision for that?
Well, it's kind of small, but I'm not complaining. It's gonna, as you know, it's gonna have 2 kiosks in it. I think 2 pretty high dollar kiosks the city's putting in there. They're like touch screen. Mm-hmm. KSU's doing the storyboards. We're gonna have 10 or 12 storyboards in there. And all these interviews will be in there. And, we just got some display cases to go in there that I understand came out of the old Durham Brothers Drugs that came to Ackworth in 1895. They were one of the first drug stores in Georgia, I think. So that's going to be neat to be able to display stuff in there. And of course, we have the scales that were in the original depot. They're sitting out here in the lobby. I know you saw those.
I saw them. Right.
Our group paid $3,000 or $4,000 to have those restored. Mm-hmm. I mean,
they look nice.
Well, they look nice, but when we picked them up, Moose McCrae and his family donated those back, and they were literally sitting under a shed that was falling in, so they look pretty rough. So Clemens Bach did an outstanding job on those. So
they're going to be in the.
They will be in. They will be in
number 4.
Right.
And depot number 4 is not quite the same size as depot number 4.
No, a little something about the depot that was here for all those decades. I've read something somewhere, or somebody might have said something about it on the history site. Mm-hmm. That depot, that was a huge depot for a small town. Mm-hmm. And I can give you the dimensions of it. It was 32 foot wide and 112 foot long.
Wow.
So, they said that where Ackworth was located on the railroad, I guess it was like a central station. Mm-hmm. So I think that's the reason it was so big. It was centrally located and might have been a switching station or something. Mm-hmm. I don't know for sure, but there's no other reason why it would have been so big, because Kennesaw's is about the same size that we're getting here. Mm-hmm. So,
okay. What size is the new one?
I couldn't tell you exactly. I think it's about 20 by 55 or something. I don't know. I don't have the dimensions on it.
Yeah. So, well, a little bit more than half the
yeah, one. Yeah, about half the size of the other one. Okay. But we're glad to get it. I mean, I'm like I say, from what we started from, we're very glad to get it. Mm-hmm. And we're seeing on our Facebook page, we're seeing a lot more young people get involved in this history thing. That's what I'm really pleased with that. Mm-hmm. I mean, they're and not only are they signing up, they're asking a lot of questions. So I'm hoping this history center just kind of evolves into more and more young people getting involved in it.
Mm-hmm. So you see the Save Ackworth History Foundation going on indefinitely?
Yeah, I do. I think it's going to go on indefinitely. I don't know that I'll be a part of it indefinitely, but I certainly hadn't found a way to get out of it yet. You know, they won't let me. So I don't know exactly where it's going, but I only see better things for us. We got a few things in the works, some donations we're going to be making. I can't say anything about it right now, but trying to bring some youth into it. Mm-hmm. So,
well, you were the Ackworth Citizen of the Year for 2018.
Yeah, I'm still trying to figure that one out. I'm still kind of in shock, but I'm very humble to win it. I don't know whose decision that was, but I tell you how much I knew about it. I didn't even know Ackworth had a Citizen of the Year. But since I saw the list, I'm even more humble to be on it. A lot of people that I really admire. One of my old bankers and one of my insurance men. So just people like that I've known, and a lot of great people in this town.
Well, I'm sure because of all the work that you've done to save Ackworth history.
Well, I appreciate that. I guess that's what it is. I don't know anything else it could be. Mm-hmm. It's not my charming personality, I'll assure you.
It could be that too.
Yeah.
What's kept you in Ackworth all these years?
Well, I just wouldn't want to be anywhere else. I think one of the questions that was asked on there is where else would you want to be? And I guess if I was going to be anywhere else, I'd move back. I'd move to Paulding County since that's where all my kinfolk are. Mm-hmm. But I've never lived in Paulding County. But every time I go over there, I just get the feeling that I'm home. Mm-hmm. But just the people here, just great people and small town atmosphere. Of course, it is growing, but it's still got a lot of the small town feel. Mm-hmm. So that's what's kept me here.
How's it changed over the years?
Well, I was thinking about that question the other day. When I grew up, let's say mid-50s, mm-hmm. I don't remember any subdivisions in this town. I don't think there were, except the Mill Village. Mm-hmm. There were communities, there were streets, there were houses. And now, I don't know, there may be hundreds of subdivisions. So that's one thing that's changed. Once they started building subdivisions, it was nonstop. Mm-hmm. So I think that's one of the biggest things. And just the development everywhere, the development of 41, that's had been a big shot in the arm for this town. Mm-hmm. So.
Well, it's a neat place, I think, for all the historic homes that are in Ackworth, too. Mm-hmm. Going back toward the beach.
Oh, yeah, there's some real historic homes. Matter of fact, Becca, that home they live in was built by her husband's grandfather, and I think he built 4 or 5 homes there, and they were all classic homes. Mm-hmm.
Right. Well, I saw that you had 2 children, 3 grandchildren, and a great-grandchild. You're too young to have a great-grandchild.
No. Well, I mean, I got married young. I've been married 52 years. We got married in 1966. So, mm-hmm.
You want to talk about it, any of them?
The family? They're all still live in this area, and my son, he owns part of a building supply company. And my daughter, she's been working for Costco in Kennesaw ever since it's been there. Mm-hmm. So they've done pretty well.
Mm-hmm. And so, grandchildren, how old are they now?
I think they're 29 and 20. I'd have to go back and count. 29 and 26, I think. Mm-hmm. 29. The 2 girls are 26, and my grandson's 29.
Okay. And then one great-grandchild.
Right.
How old's the great-grandchild?
She's 6.
Okay.
Mm-hmm.
Oh.
She's the cat's meow. She's got me wrapped thoroughly around her little finger, So.
Well, I'm about out of questions. What would you like to have talked about that we haven't?
Well, one thing I'd like to talk about is I'd like to thank you for doing these interviews, and I'd like for everybody to know that you're donating your time, and we couldn't have a better person doing them. And also Jake there, he's done. Y'all have done an outstanding job, and we're just happy and fortunate that we can sponsor these interviews.
Well, it's been fun for us, and Jake's been checking around. I don't think anybody else has a project like this anywhere that we know about.
No, but I think I talked with Amy Reed, her at Marietta mm-hmm. Museum a while back. I think they're looking at maybe doing some of this. So maybe we started something here.
Maybe so.
So that's a good thing.
Yeah. Great. Well, thank you very much.
Thank you, sir.